Good morning, gentlemen. I'm sitting outside my villa here. I got the sea just behind me, the small wall, lovely trees, sands. I'm going to talk to you something about India. Yes, about India. Now, the problem dates back to 1947, frankly. That was the time when Pandit Nehru took over the leadership of India. And 2 years later, there was a civil war which was over in China, and Mao Zedong took over the mainland of China. Now, these were supposed to be the two pivotal figures of the 20th century, and it's a moot point who would be the greater of them. Obviously, Mao had greater acumen, greater experience, and he had a one-track mind, while Nehru wasn't focused on anything other than the fact that he wanted to be known as a great third world leader. So net result was India lagged behind China. Well, nobody noticed this for some time, for a couple of years, because Pandit Nehru, in his wisdom, decided that the maps which had been left behind by the British were the ones which would be sacrosanct as far as India is concerned. But he forgot the principle that possession is 9/10 of the law. And those areas which were earmarked on the map as part of India were not policed by him, not administered by him. So thousands of kilometers of area which was unpoliced was handed over to China on a platter. Take it, sir, take it. And that's what happened. India lost Aksai Chin, 30,000 square miles or maybe more, and a lot of other areas which have been continued losing till the time Narendra Modi came into power. But now these 70 years which were there with the Congress party can't be written off. And you can't leapfrog those 70 years and come back to the modern age. That's the harsh truth. So, gentlemen, this is now replicate to what is happening in Bhutan. Now, Bhutan was a protectorate of India from the days of the British Raj. And the Indo-Bhutanese treaty was signed, I think, in 1950, which said that defense and foreign affairs would be the responsibility of the Indian government, and Bhutan would have local autonomy. That's about all. In other words, Bhutan had become a protectorate of India. But when you become a protectorate, you've got to protect that place, that country, so that nobody covets it, nobody throws any eyes on it. Initially, nothing happened, because after the 62 defeat, the Chinese were pretty content, as it were, to keep the Indian territories, and they didn't touch on other countries like Bhutan and Nepal, etc. But very soon, when President Xi came into power, he wanted to restore the old glory of the Chinese Empire, which was dead in the Middle Ages. And in the meantime, he had built up a formidable military arsenal, the second largest military force in the world, the largest navy in the world, and an economy that was 6 times the size of India, $18 trillion, so that even the Americans would think twice before they deal with them. So, gentlemen, that was the position which Narendra Modi inherited. And the Chinese were keen to needle India because India is not accepting the leadership of China. And that is the point which has to be noted. Now, there's an old saying, a book written by Nanak Singh in Punjabi, which says, Ik miyan, do talwara. That means one scabbard and 2 swords. Now, in Asia, you can only have one scabbard, and there were 2 swords, that is India and China. Which is the sword which will fit into the scabbard? Unfortunately, the Indians are already frittered their chances away. Pandit Nehru has sold India down the drain. I'm really sad about talking like this about a man who led India for 17 years. That's a fact. But that leadership is what is called transitory. He led India down the abyss of no return and put an anchor around the head of the necks of the leaders who followed him, with the result we are reaping the benefits of Nehru 17 years now. Well, gentlemen, as you all know, Nepal had an insurrection on. There was a communist revolution on there. And ultimately, the king was overthrown. He had to run away. And the Nepalese Communist Party in election came to power. And the moment they came into power, the policy of Nepal changed vis-a-vis India. I'll talk about that later, but now I'm going to concentrate more on Bhutan. Bhutan became a protectorate, and they were pretty content and happy. But the Chinese were not going to do anything, and they started needling needling Bhutan. The idea was not to trouble Bhutan, but the idea was to break the Indian stranglehold over Bhutan so that Bhutan becomes dependent on China like Nepal. To start with, they created an incident on the Nepali border. That is a famous Dokham incident. And there, India put in a brigade to face the Chinese. And the Chinese had massed troops on the other side. But luckily, sanity prevailed and the Chinese went back. But frankly, gentlemen, let me tell you, the Chinese just went a few hundred yards back and set up their own camp there again, while the Indians withdrew the whole hog. So Doklam, as we know it now, was in fact a tactical victory for the Chinese, and the Chinese knew that India could not battle them at all. Rather, India didn't have the mettle to battle them. Now they came up with some weird theories, and one of these was they claimed a substantial portion of Bhutan as their territory. Now there is a 1715 treaty which was signed between Tibet and Nepal at that time, wherein this particular area, which is claimed by China, was handed over to Tibet. But there was a clause there that the Nepalese could go and settle there, the Bhutanese could settle there and use the land for grazing, etc. That is basically the mountain animals like the yak. But this treaty is there, and the Chinese resurrected the treaty. They were keeping it quiet for about half a century after 49, and now they have resurrected it, and they said, well, this treaty is there, this is part of our territory. Now Nepal is also anti-India. That's one thing is clear. And Bhutan at the moment is not anti-India, but probably is going to head that way. That's what the Chinese wanted. Because for the simple reason, India does not militarily match to China. And tomorrow, if there's a clash with China on on Bhutan, it is the Indian side which will not be able to carry the day. So this realization has dawned on the Bhutanese leadership that India is a weak country, cannot face up to China. And so they have started their direct negotiations with Beijing. Now that's a blow to India, tell you. But who's responsible for it? I don't think you can blame the Bhutanese for it, because Bhutan has seen that after Doklam and others, and even now the way the Indians faced up to the Chinese in the Galwan incident, when 20 of the soldiers were bludgeoned to death, it's a lot to be desired. I'm very sorry when I tell you this. I'll give you a small anecdote from my life in the services. When I was doing the Defense Services Staff College, I won't tell you the year and the other details. We were taken on a study tour of Ladakh, and the Deputy GOC gave us a presentation as to how we were facing the Chinese. He didn't give us any figures, but finally I asked him, sir, how many Indian divisions are facing China? And he said, after thought, 1. And how many, I asked him, are the Chinese divisions facing us on the other side? He said 6. So you can see the preponderance of manpower and troops in favor of China. Now that thankfully has changed. We have positioned about 50,000 troops on the border, but our infrastructure is still poor. And the Chinese have a rail line right up to the border, and they're constructing one right up to Tawang also, I believe. So gentlemen, bear in mind that India, because being militarily and economically weak and not a match to China, has given the option to the Bhutanese to directly negotiate with China. I think it's a body blow to the Indian policy. And who is to be blamed for it? Even I think Narendra Modi is responsible for it, because he is also caught up in a vortex of Indian politics. And the vortex of Indian politics is that you talk about caste, you talk about reservation, you talk about all nonsense, and you don't think about something bigger, that is building the Indian military might to match China. Now, gentlemen, you know what's happened as far as the Indian military is concerned. It has been pegged at 1.2 million, and it's supposed to be an army which is supposed to have a two-front war. The very fact that Indian generals talk of a defensive fight and say we'll give a fitting reply is itself a negative concept, and it shows that there's no plan the Indians have or ever taking the battle into Tibet and say capture Lhasa. It's not there. And the army for that purpose is too small, and it also doesn't have the latest weaponry which is required. The Chinese, on the other hand, have gone into cyber warfare in a big way, and they could jam the Indian communication system anytime. That's a point which we must understand. So the problem of Bhutan is Bhutan's problem, no doubt, but it concerns India because Bhutan is a protectorate of India. So what is the use of the 1950 treaty when you can't give a guarantee to Bhutan that come what may, be fight on your side and see that you win? There's no way, nothing's going to happen like that. And the problem is that the Bhutanese are now very wary of what's happening, and they are negotiating directly with China. Gentlemen, watch out this for a further installment later. Probably the Chinese are making some concessions to the Bhutanese, and they'll wean them away from India like they have weaned away Nepal from India, and Burma from India, and Sri Lanka from India. Because all over, the crux of the thing boils down is, aap mein kitna dam hai? How much of strength you have got? And just some of our channels going and, shouting from the rooftops, India, Vijav Guru hai, this thing, that thing, I mean, it's all crap. Got no meaning. Because what matters is how much is the military might you have and how much of influence you have in the world. And that is where India has to counter China. I don't think India is having any such plans at all to counter China on such things. And in any case, they don't have the resources. You can't catch up with an economy which is 6 times your size. There's a lot of people talking, China is collapsing, this thing, that thing. I don't think China is going to collapse overnight. It's not going to happen like that. That way America will also collapse ultimately. But before that, India will collapse in that case. Well, gentlemen, I'll close now and say goodbye. Do subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends. I look forward to talking more with you. This small video is on Bhutan, which is now going out of the Indian orbit. And probably it will be, because that's the law of history. When you don't build up your force, you don't build up your military infrastructure, this is what you get. Goodbye, gentlemen. Take care and God bless.